That weekend was supposed to be calm and fun. My friends and I just wanted to spend a couple of days high in the mountains, away from the city, where it's quiet, the air is fresh, and there are no people around. But things went off track right from the start. Now we're all back home, where nothing can hurt us. Still, there are moments when I close my eyes, remember what happened, and that same uneasy feeling comes back. There were 4 of us. Me, my name is Lucas, my friend Tyler, his girlfriend Kayla, and our mutual friend Aaron. We're all from Denver, and we usually spent our weekends in restaurants, noisy bars, or at someone's place with pizza. This trip felt like a small escape. Tyler had found a cabin on the slopes of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, far from tourist trails, and told us it was almost a secret spot. According to him, it belonged to some friends of his parents who hadn't used it in a long time. The fewer details he gave, the more appealing it sounded. A weekend in the mountains, no signal, no neighbors, just us and nature. We left in the morning, when the city wasn't fully awake yet. The farther we drove, the fewer gas stations we saw, and houses and signs became rare. The road gradually climbed upward, smooth asphalt turned into a rough, cracked strip, and then into stretches of gravel. The forest thickened, the light barely slipping through the pine branches. Here and there on the slopes, patches of old gray snow still clung to the ground. The GPS died long before we reached the final point. First, the signal disappeared, then the map froze, and the little blue dot stayed frozen far behind us among random road lines. From that point on, we followed Tyler's saved directions: an old forest turnoff, a rusty sign with a half-erased name, then a few more miles uphill until the road opened into a small clearing. The cabin stood slightly off to the side, near the edge of the slope, surrounded by tall pines. Small, one-story, with a wooden porch and dark windows. It didn't look abandoned, but it didn't look lived in either. Right behind the cabin, there was a small shed, and beyond it, a rocky drop. I stepped out of the car and took a breath, cold air with the smell of pine. Somewhere above us, a tree creaked in the wind. Tyler stretched, Aaron looked around, Kayla grabbed her phone and frowned at the screen. 0 bars, exactly as promised. No signal, no civilization. We unloaded our stuff from the trunk: backpacks, bags of food, sleeping bags, a couple of beer cases. As I closed the car door, I noticed our tire tracks laying over old ones. Someone had been here before us. I didn't think much of it at the moment. The cabin door wasn't locked. Inside it smelled like wood, the fireplace, and food, which immediately put us on edge. The main room looked strange. In the center stood a table with plates of food, utensils, mugs. The food looked completely fresh, just cold. Pasta, some kind of sauce, bread, meat. Someone's dinner, like they'd left it an hour ago and never came back. I noticed the table was set for 3. There was a bit of a mess, but not the kind you see after a party. A couple of chairs were knocked over. A spoon lay on the floor. A backpack sat by the wall, half turned inside out, with random things spilled next to it. A charger, earbuds, a pack of tissues. On the couch, there was a pile of clothes, as if someone had been frantically searching for something. Not dirt, not destruction. More like someone's life had suddenly been cut off mid-action. With every step I took inside, the uneasiness grew. It wasn't the creepy but fun feeling you get exploring abandoned places. It felt heavier, like stepping into someone else's life without permission. We split up to check the rest of the cabin. Bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, a small bathroom. No people. No notes like, "Be right back." Not a single hint of where the people who were clearly here just recently had gone. A very rational kind of fear started creeping in. When you step into a house where someone was literally moments ago and they're suddenly gone, it's not some mysterious puzzle. It's a safety issue. Who were they? Why did they leave their food? Why the chaos? Aaron looked tense. Kayla clearly wanted to get back in the car and drive down toward any populated area. Tyler, on the contrary, tried to turn the silent tension into something like, "Hey, it happens." But even he wasn't convincing. We ended up agreeing on a compromise. Stay for a bit, drive to the lake Tyler had seen on the map, supposedly beautiful, and later, if it still felt wrong, head back down. It sounded reasonable until we actually got to that lake. The drive to the water took about 10 to 15 minutes down a narrow forest road. The trees thinned out, and a bright reflection of the sky appeared ahead. The lake was beautiful, clear bluish water, rocky shore, forested slopes, no houses, no boats, no trails. Just an old wooden picnic table and a couple of fire pits filled with hardened ashes. When we got out of the car, the first thing I heard wasn't water or wind, it was a sharp gunshot, then a second, then a third. They came one after another with short pauses. In the mountains, sound bounces in strange ways, echoing off the slopes, so it's impossible to tell where it's coming from. After the third shot, the silence felt even worse. A moment later, two men appeared on the path coming from the other side. They were wearing old, worn-out hunting camouflage. One had binoculars hanging from his chest. Both carried old bolt-action rifles. Their movements were confident and predatory, like people who felt they owned the place. They came too close for us to pretend we didn't see them. Their eyes ran over us from head to toe, not a greeting, an assessment. They clearly didn't like finding strangers here. The way they behaved left no doubt. They felt free to do whatever they wanted. Their body language was predatory. One stepped almost within arm's reach, studying us like he was deciding what kind of threat we were. The other stayed slightly behind him, finger resting on the trigger. I could feel the tension growing around us. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Erin wasn't looking at their faces. She was looking at the backpack hanging off one man's shoulder. Something dark was dripping from the bottom seam onto a rock. One drop, then another, each leaving a small, uneven stain. She shifted slightly to see better, and I looked too. It was blood, thick, real, starting to darken from the cold. That's when the uneasy feeling turned into real fear. Sure, hunters go to the mountains, but I'd seen enough to know this wasn't normal hunting. Fresh blood, aggression, those shots earlier, none of it matched legal, regulated hunting. Time seemed to stretch. I knew there was only one thing we could do. No arguing, no sudden moves, no trying to act tough. Just get out of there in one piece. We started packing up like we were simply leaving the area, slow, calm movements. When Tyler stepped toward the trunk, one of the men lifted his rifle slightly and pointed it at us, very deliberately. We got away from the lake as fast as we could. As our SUV turned onto the road back to the cabin, I glanced into the rearview mirror. The men were running toward where their car must have been, hidden behind the trees, invisible from the shore. Seconds later, headlights flicked on. When we reached the cabin, we jumped out like it was a safe zone. The place that had felt unsettling before suddenly seemed like the only somewhat predictable place in this entire forest. We agreed not to stay until dark. No overnight stay, no stargazing. Just pack up quickly, grab a bite, and head down before the sun set. We needed to cook something small from the food we brought so we wouldn't drive on empty stomachs. Tyler went behind the cabin to the firewood shed to grab some wood for the stove. The land dropped sharply right after that shed. We'd seen it earlier but didn't go near the edge. I stayed inside, absent-mindedly stuffing our things back into backpacks, while Erin and Kayla discussed what to take and what to leave. We didn't care about half the supplies anymore. At some point, I heard footsteps behind the cabin speed up, then a sound I didn't recognize right away, like someone spinning around and running. Tyler burst into the cabin, completely pale. His breathing was heavy, his eyes darting around, like he needed to make sure all of us were still there. Only then did he manage to say what he'd seen. Down the slope, right behind the cabin, lying among rocks and bushes, was a car. The roof crushed in, windows shattered, the body twisted. On some of the less damaged metal panels, you could see bullet holes, It was an SUV, roughly the same size as ours. The worst part was that the vehicle looked recent. Not a rusted wreck that had been there for years, but something pushed off the cliff not too long ago. The headlights still kept their shape, and some parts of the metal hadn't even darkened yet. From that distance, it was impossible to tell if someone was inside, but no one had tried to pull the vehicle out. It looked like someone simply got rid of it by pushing it over the edge and walking away. In my head, the picture came together fast. The table set for 3. Fresh food, the mess, the belongings scattered around. People had arrived before us, set the table. Something happened. They jumped up, panicked, maybe fought, maybe ran. Their car was now lying at the bottom, and they were nowhere. I remembered the blood dripping from that man's backpack, the gunshots, their hostility when they saw us at the lake. In that moment, the uneasy feeling turned into a clear realization. We were standing in the middle of someone else's territory. Someone who did things they didn't want anyone to know about. And they'd already seen us, and they knew we saw them. The phone in my pocket felt like a cold, useless piece of plastic. No bars, no network icon. Even if we left immediately, it would take at least an hour to reach the first stretch of highway where we might get a signal. Not miles, but time during which anything could happen. We decided to leave immediately. No food, no nice mountain photos. Only essentials, documents, keys, the basics. My hands trembled slightly as I zipped my backpack. That's when a gunshot rang out outside. It was louder and closer than the ones at the lake. The sound slammed into the cabin's walls. We instinctively ducked. The silence afterward wasn't neutral. It was tight, like a wire pulled to its limit. Staying in the cabin meant turning into easy targets inside a wooden box. We were probably the only people within miles who could hear that shot. We ran for the door. I reached the porch first and looked straight at the car. One of the side windows was shattered, covered in spiderweb cracks. Glass shards were on the seat and floor mat. The bullet had hit exactly there. No stray shot, no hunting accident. Someone aimed for the car, our only way out. My stomach tightened with cold fear. As we stared at the broken window, another shot echoed from the forest. Quieter, muffled by trees, direction unclear. It felt like the sound came from everywhere. We sprinted to the car. I jumped into the driver's seat, feeling glass crunch under my hands. When the engine started on the first try, it felt like a miracle. I hit the gas. The car lurched forward, and we sped off. As we pulled away from the clearing, another bullet hit something nearby. I heard the whistle and a dull thud against a tree. It didn't hit the car, but it was enough to confirm one thing. Someone was shooting at us. From that point on, there was only movement. Everything that mattered that morning, work, school, plans, vanished. All that remained was, keep the wheels steady, don't slide off the road, avoid potholes, dodge rocks, don't stall. The forest streaked past in blurred lines. The road bucked under the tires. I kept checking the rearview mirror, but there was no van, no pickup with headlights chasing us. Just an empty dirt road in the forest. When we finally reached a wider road where gravel turned into real asphalt, breathing became easier. The forest opened up, the sky got wider. My phone didn't come alive right away. We drove for a while before the first bar appeared, then the second. Only then did I dial 911. The operator's voice was calm. I explained where we'd been, how far from the nearest town, what we saw in the cabin, the car at the bottom of the slope, the men with rifles, the blood, the shots fired at our vehicle. I caught myself constantly looking around, checking if those headlights would appear behind a bend. The operator asked clarifying questions and repeated the usual lines about passing the information to local authorities, that we needed to reach a safe location, and to stay on the line if possible. We never found out what was in that backpack dripping blood onto the rocks, never found out who had been sitting at that table with the cold dinner, Never found out who owned the car at the bottom of the slope.